Miami changed the entire feel of this Formula One season. Mercedes still won. Kimi Antonelli still looked like a future monster. But suddenly the gap didn't look untouchable anymore. McLaren got properly close. Ferrari showed flashes and then collapsed. Red Bull found something but not enough. And now every single team knows the same thing. This next upgrade phase could define the rest of 2026. Let's start with Mercedes because they're still the benchmark whether people like it or not. Antonelli has now won 3 races in a row. He leads the championship on 100 points. George Russell is right there on 80. Mercedes lead the constructors on 180 points. That is not a good start. That is a statement. But here's the thing. Miami also exposed their weakness. Starts. Again, Antonelli nearly lost control of the race into turn 1, and Toto Wolff admitted it wasn't on the driver. He said, "For me, that was his best race so far," but he also admitted Mercedes are not doing a good enough job with the tools they're giving the drivers off the line. That matters, because when your rivals are within a couple of tenths, bad starts become race losing. So what do Mercedes need from this next package? Not a revolution. They don't need one. They need polish. Cleaner launches. More consistency across a full weekend. Slightly stronger tyre life in the hotter races. And maybe most importantly, they need to protect Antonelli from getting dragged into messy fights early. If they do that, this car stays the car to beat. If they don't, that points lead will start shrinking very quickly. McLaren are the team that should leave Miami both encouraged and annoyed. Encouraged because the car clearly moved forward. Annoyed because they probably left a win on the table. Lando Norris finished second, just 3.264 seconds behind Antonelli. Oscar Piastri was third, and Andrea Stella didn't hide from it. He basically said the win slipped away through execution and optimization. That's brutal because it's true. McLaren had real speed, not fake Friday speed, not sprint-only speed, real race speed. Stella even said Mercedes still had a couple of tenths advantage, but he also said McLaren have some more upgrades coming from the same development stream. Now pay attention to that. That means Miami wasn't the full story. It was the start of a chain. That should scare Mercedes. McLaren's big strength is still tyre consistency. Over a stint, they come alive. Norris and Piastri can lean on the rubber longer than most teams, but they still need better one-lap sharpness and better operational aggression. When the undercut window opens, they have to nail it. No hesitation. No giving the faster car track position. If the next McLaren parts work, this title fight stops being Mercedes versus the field. It becomes a real two-team war. Ferrari are the team under the most pressure. No debate. They're second in the constructors on 110 points, which sounds respectable until you remember they're already 70 behind Mercedes after just 4 rounds. Charles Leclerc is third in the drivers on 63. Lewis Hamilton is fifth on 49. But Miami felt awful. Leclerc led early, looked sharp, then everything unraveled. Oscar Piastri got him late. Leclerc spun on the final lap, clipped the wall, then got hit with a 20-second penalty that dropped him to 8th. Hamilton finished 6th after damage and said it was a tough weekend and that he spent the race in no man's land. That is not what Ferrari signed him for, and it's definitely not what the Tifosi want to hear. Sky reported Fred Vasseur has confirmed some small upgrades are coming. Small. Not massive. Not season-saving. Small. That tells you Ferrari are still trying to understand the car before throwing everything at it. And don't forget the bigger context. Barcelona is looming with the front-wing flex tests. Vasseur said, everybody will have a new front wing in Barcelona, and that could act like a partial reset. So Ferrari's next upgrade phase has 2 jobs. First, stop the bleeding now. Second, be ready to attack when that rule tweak lands. If the small fixes work, Ferrari stay in the hunt. If they don't, the focus swings to next year earlier than anyone in Maranello wants to admit. Red Bull are probably the most fascinating team in the whole paddock right now. On paper, 5th in Miami doesn't look like disaster. In reality, Max Verstappen finished 48.949 seconds behind the winner. Let that sink in. Nearly 50 seconds. That is not a Red Bull number. That's a damage control number. The encouraging part is that Miami's new flaw was real. Formula One's Tech Weekly said it added aero load, but it wasn't specifically designed to fix the balance problem. And that is the key. Red Bull's biggest issue isn't raw downforce. It's the window. The car isn't friendly enough across different corner types. Christian Horner said, there is no big update in the next step and that it's now all about incremental gains. That sounds calm, maybe too calm. Because incremental gains are great when you're leading. They're less great when Mercedes are on 180 points and Verstappen is only 7th in the drivers on 26. Red Bull's next package has to make the car more drivable. Wider window, better entry stability, Better confidence on the front axle. If they get that, Verstappen becomes dangerous again instantly. If they don't, this season becomes about damage limitation and stealing wins when chaos hits. Alpine quietly had one of the most important Sundays in Miami. Franco Colapinto finished 7th. That was huge. Pierre Gasly crashed out, so the team still left with mixed emotions, but Alpine are sitting on 23 points and right in that midfield fight. Here's what matters with Alpine. They don't need a miracle. They need validation. They need proof that the car can repeatedly score when the weekend stays clean. Colapinto gave them that. Now the next upgrade step has to make the rear more predictable and the overall package less fragile in traffic. Why? Because this midfield is savage. If you're not perfect, you get swallowed. Alpine's problem isn't always headline pace. Sometimes it's just inconsistency. One good session, then one bad one, then the whole weekend is gone. If they bring the right kind of sensible, stable package, they can lock themselves into that 5th place constructors fight. And once you do that, every point becomes gold. Haas are right there too, and honestly, they deserve more attention than they're getting. They're on 18 points. Ollie Behrman is 8th in the drivers with 17, which is a massive overachievement compared to where most people had Haas before the season. Miami wasn't spectacular. Behrman just missed the points in 11th. Ocon was down the order, but this is exactly why their next upgrade matters. Haas are no longer just trying to survive. They're trying to stay in the argument every weekend. That changes everything. You don't throw a random package at the car anymore. You target specific weaknesses: medium speed balance, tyre protection late in stints, drag efficiency when you're defending down long straights. Haas don't need fireworks. They need repeatability. If they get even a 10th from the next package, that could be the difference between P11 and P8 most weekends. And in this midfield, that's enormous. Racing bulls are harder to read because the Miami weekend got messy. Liam Lawson retired after contact. Isaac Hadjar crashed. The team is on 14 points, which is not terrible, but the momentum feels shaky. And that's dangerous. Because when you're a midfield team, momentum is almost a performance upgrade on its own. Lose it, and everything gets heavier. Strategy feels slower. Pit stops feel slower. Driver confidence drops. So what do racing bulls need from the next parts? Honestly, calm. They need a car that lets the drivers attack curbs without second-guessing it. They need something more forgiving in the dirty air. And they need a package that works immediately, not one that takes 3 weekends to understand. This team has shown flashes. Lawson is 10th in the drivers. There is something there. But flashes don't build constructors' points. Usable pace does. And that's the difference between hanging around 7th or getting dragged backward. Williams might only have 5 points, but Miami mattered for them. Carlos Sainz was 9th. Alex Albon was 10th. Double points. Clean race. No drama. That's progress. Now, do we have a giant public Williams upgrade dossier yet? No. And that itself tells a story. Williams don't always arrive with the loudest package. Sometimes they arrive with the smartest one. That's the play for them. Not chasing headline downforce. Chasing efficient gains, smarter cooling, better platform control, slightly more confidence in qualifying so they stop starting from compromised positions. Sainz and Albon are too good to be fighting for scraps all year. If Williams can turn this next development window into steady Q3 appearances, their season changes completely. You know what the scary part is? In a field this tight, 2 straight clean weekends can make a backmarker look like a midfielder. Audi needs something fast. They've got 2 points. Gabriel Bortoleto was 12th in Miami. Nico Hülkenberg retired. And too often, the Audi story is the same. The car hangs around the edge of the conversation without ever forcing itself into it. That's the worst place to be in Formula One. Not disastrous enough to trigger panic. Not good enough to matter. So their next upgrades don't just need to add pace. They need to create identity. Is this car better in slow corners? High-speed changes of direction? Braking zones? Right now it feels vague. And vague doesn't score points. Audi's next package has to give the drivers something they can trust, especially in qualifying, because when you start too far back, the race turns into traffic management and then your tyres are cooked before the real fight begins. Cadillac are still hunting their first points, and Miami didn't change that. Sergio Perez was 16th. Valtteri Bottas got a drive-through for pit lane speeding and finished 18th. 0 points in the constructors. But don't dismiss them too quickly. New teams live in this phase. One part development cycle can suddenly turn survival pace into lower midfield pace. The question is whether Cadillac can tighten the operational side fast enough to make any new parts count. Because pace alone won't save them if the execution stays messy. They need a cleaner race floor, fewer self-inflicted wounds, better tyre warm-up, better qualifying prep. The kind of stuff that sounds boring until you realize it's worth 3 or 4 positions on a Sunday. Aston Martin are in an even stranger place. They're still on 0. Fernando Alonso finished 15th in Miami. Lance Stroll was 17th. And for a team with Aston Martin's resources, that is nowhere near acceptable. This is where fans start asking uncomfortable questions. Not just about the car, but about direction. Because when the results are this flat, every upcoming upgrade becomes a referendum. Is the concept wrong? Is the correlation wrong? Is the team already leaning too hard into the future? We don't have a big public list of confirmed parts for Aston right now, but that doesn't really matter. Whatever arrives next has to do one thing above all else. It has to be visible, not in photographs. On the stopwatch, Alonso can extract from almost anything, but even he can't invent grip that isn't there. Aston need a real step, not a press release step. And then there's the bigger picture hanging over all of this. Barcelona, the front wing flex crackdown. That's the hidden deadline. Some teams are chasing raw lap time. Some are chasing balance. Some are just trying to survive long enough to see whether the regulation tweak shuffles the deck. That's why this next upgrade phase is so important. It's not just about the next race. It's about putting yourself in the right position before the board gets shaken again. Mercedes want to lock in control. McLaren want to turn pressure into wins. Ferrari want rescue. Red Bull want drivability. The midfield wants separation. The backmarkers want hope. Same sport. Very different missions. So who's the biggest winner heading into this upgrade war? Honestly, it's still Mercedes. They have the points cushion. They have the fastest overall package right now. They have Antonelli driving like he's been doing this for 10 years. But the team I'd watch most closely is McLaren, because they already proved in Miami that their big package worked, and Stella is openly saying more is coming. Ferrari are at the edge. Red Bull are at the crossroads. Aston Martin are running out of excuses. And for everyone else, this is the moment where seasons either come alive or quietly fade away. If you ask me, the next development cycle decides whether 2026 becomes a Mercedes march or a 4-team fight. And I'll go even further than that. If McLaren find just a little more qualifying sharpness, they're winning very soon. If Ferrari's small upgrades don't hit immediately, they're done. And if Red Bull still can't widen that balance window after the next round of parts, Verstappen's title dream is basically hanging by a thread already. That's why this matters so much. Not because every team suddenly found half a second overnight, but because the order is starting to move, the pressure is starting to rise, and the excuses are about to disappear. So which team do you think nails the next upgrade step? Mercedes, McLaren, Ferrari, Red Bull, or a midfield shock package nobody sees coming? Let me know down below, and if you want more sharp F1 breakdowns like this, hit subscribe because the next few race weekends could get absolutely wild.